The silence in the Galactic Council chamber was deafening. Ambassador Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display showing the remains of the Kepler 442 colony, her hands trembling as images of twisted metal and scattered debris filled the air. What had once been a thriving settlement of 12,000 beings, humans, Altarians, and Vegan refugees, was now nothing more than scorched earth and ash. The hegemony left no survivors, reported Council Archivist Vex High, his blue-scaled face grim. They broadcast the execution of civilians before orbital bombardment. The transmission was sent to every inhabited system within 50 light-years. Sarah's jaw clenched. The hegemony had been making aggressive moves for months, but this was different. This was deliberate genocide, performed for an audience. They wanted everyone to see what happened to colonies that refused their demands for submission. "How many children?" Sarah asked quietly. 4,216, Vex High replied, his voice barely a whisper. The chamber erupted in angry chittering and growls from various species representatives. The Kepler 442 colony had been under Terran protection, a joint settlement that represented everything the Galactic Council stood for: cooperation, diversity, peaceful coexistence. Now it was gone. Council Prime Thelandra raised her 4 arms for silence. The hegemony claims this was a legitimate military action against a rebel stronghold. They cite colony resistance to their taxation demands. Taxation demands? Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. They demanded 70% of all food production, leaving barely enough for survival. When the colonists asked for negotiation, they got orbital bombardment. The hologram shifted to show intercepted hegemony communications. General Krexthor, commander of their Second Fleet, appeared in the center of the chamber. His insectoid features twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. "Let this be a lesson to all who would defy the natural order," his recorded voice echoed. "The strong rule, the weak serve. Those who forget their place become examples for others." Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. The other ambassadors were talking about sanctions, about formal protests, about taking the matter to the High Court of Worlds. They didn't understand. They couldn't understand. Humans were still new to galactic politics. Most species saw them as young, idealistic, perhaps a bit naive. Earth had been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries, discovering faster-than-light travel through careful study of artifacts left by older civilizations. They were students in this vast, cosmic classroom, learning how mature species conducted affairs. But there were things about humanity that the galaxy hadn't yet grasped. Things that Sarah hoped they would never need to learn. She activated her communicator with a subtle gesture. Priority Alpha transmission to Earth Central Command. Admiral Marcus Webb answered within seconds, his weathered face appearing on her personal display. Behind him, Sarah could see the controlled chaos of the military command center. "Ambassador Chen, we've been monitoring the situation. My condolences for the colonists. Admiral, I'm formally requesting immediate consultation under Article 7 of the Terran Defense Accord." Webb's expression didn't change, but Sarah saw his eyes harden. Article 7 hadn't been invoked since its creation. It was the provision that allowed Earth's military to act unilaterally when Terran citizens were targeted for extermination. "Understood. Council Prime Thelandra needs to be informed of our response protocols." Sarah glanced around the chamber where aliens continued their debates about proper diplomatic channels. "I don't think they understand what those protocols entail." "Then they're about to learn something about human nature," Webb replied grimly. "Give me 12 hours to mobilize. I'll need you to stall any council actions during that time." The connection closed, and Sarah turned back to the assembly. Council Prime. Thelandra was speaking about forming a diplomatic committee to investigate the incident. The Altarian representative was calling for economic sanctions. The Vegan delegate suggested offering the hegemony alternative trade agreements to discourage future aggression. Sarah almost laughed. These beings, some thousands of years old and representing civilizations that had existed since before humans discovered fire, had no idea what they were dealing with. The hegemony had made a fundamental error in calculation. They had assumed that humans would respond like other galactic species, with committee meetings, formal procedures, and careful diplomatic protocols. They had forgotten to study human history. Honored delegates, Sarah interrupted the ongoing debate. I appreciate your commitment to peaceful resolution. However, I must inform this council that Earth will be implementing its own response to this act of genocide. Council Prime Thelandra's crest flattened in confusion. Ambassador Chen, surely you understand that individual system responses could destabilize the entire region. We must work together through established channels. The established channels failed to prevent 4,000 children from being murdered, Sarah replied. Earth's position is clear. The hegemony has committed an act of war against Terran citizens and our allies. We will respond accordingly. The chamber fell silent again. The concept of individual military action was almost foreign to most galactic species. Wars were rare, carefully regulated affairs managed by the Council through elaborate procedures. The idea that Earth might simply act was incomprehensible to beings who had spent millennia perfecting the art of diplomatic consensus. What exactly does Earth intend? Asked Ambassador Korthak of the Centauri Federation. Sarah stood slowly, her hands clasped behind her back, in a gesture that would have been familiar to any student of human military history. The hegemony wanted to send a message. We received it. Now we're going to send one back. She walked to the central holographic display and gestured. The images of Kepler 442's destruction were replaced with star charts showing hegemony territory. 17 systems, 43 worlds, a population of nearly 6 billion beings. The hegemony believes that displays of strength create respect and submission. They're about to discover that they've fundamentally misunderstood human psychology. Council Prime. Thelandra leaned forward. Ambassador, please clarify your meaning. Sarah looked around the chamber at faces representing dozens of species, thousands of years of civilization, and countless worlds that had learned to live in careful, measured peace. They had no framework for understanding what was coming. Humans don't respond to terrorism with fear, she said quietly. We respond with fury. The hegemony wanted to show the galaxy what happens when you cross them. We're going to show them what happens when you cross us. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. For the first time since joining the Galactic Council, humanity was about to reveal exactly why their species had conquered their own planet before reaching the stars. In the silence that followed, Sarah activated her communicator once more. This time, she broadcasted on an open channel that every system in the sector would receive. General Krexthor of the Hegemony Second Fleet, my name is Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth. You killed 4,000 human children yesterday. You broadcast their deaths as entertainment. You did this because you believed we would respond like the other civilized species of the galaxy. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle across star systems. You were wrong. Earth remembers its children. And we are about to remind the galaxy why humans were the apex predators on their homeworld long before they learned to build starships. The transmission ended, but Sarah wasn't finished. She looked directly at Council Prime Thelandra. Honored Prime, I strongly recommend that you evacuate any Council personnel from Hegemony space within the next 72 hours. What's coming next will not distinguish between combatants and bystanders. As Sarah walked toward the chamber exit, she could hear the explosion of voices behind her. shocked, confused, demanding explanations. But there was nothing more to explain. The hegemony had chosen to communicate through violence and terror. Humanity was about to respond in the only language the hegemony seemed to understand. In her mind, Sarah could already picture Admiral Webb's preparations. The mobilization protocols that had never been used but had been carefully planned since humanity first ventured beyond Sol. The weapon systems that other species dismissed as primitive but had never seen employed at full capacity. The tactical doctrines developed by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare before they learned to travel between stars. The hegemony thought they had made an example of Kepler 442. They had no idea that they had just awakened something that had been dormant since humanity joined galactic civilization. They wanted to meet Earth's nightmares. They were about to get their wish. Admiral Marcus Webb stood before the largest holographic display in Earth's primary military command center, watching as red dots representing hegemony fleet positions updated in real time across 17 star systems. Behind him, 300 officers worked at stations that hummed with activity that hadn't been seen since the formation of the Terran Defense Force. "Status report," Webb commanded. Colonel Maria Santos stepped forward, her tablet glowing with deployment data. "All 6 fleets are mobilized and moving to position. The hegemony is tracking our movements but appears confused by our formations. Their intelligence suggests they expected traditional galactic warfare protocols." Webb nodded grimly. The galaxy had been at peace for so long that most species had forgotten what real warfare looked like. Their conflicts were formal affairs, carefully planned engagements with rules, observers, and predetermined objectives. They fought like chess matches, not like the desperate, brutal struggles that had shaped human military doctrine for millennia. "What's our current intelligence on hegemony defensive capabilities?" he asked. Major Chen Liu, the Admiral's intelligence chief, activated a new section of the display. Their fleet doctrine is typical for galactic powers, heavy emphasis on large, well-armed vessels designed for intimidation and frontal assault, minimal point defense systems. Their ground forces are primarily occupation troops, excellent for controlling civilian populations, but they haven't faced peer military opposition in over 3 centuries. And their leadership? General Krexthor is overconfident to the point of arrogance. He's currently broadcasting across hegemony space about humanity's pathetic posturing. Intelligence indicates he views our response as proof of galactic weakness, that we're so primitive we don't understand proper diplomatic channels. Webb allowed himself a cold smile. "What about civilian populations?" Colonel Santos pulled up demographic data. "This is where it gets complicated. The hegemony conquered these systems over the past 2 centuries. Each world has significant populations of subjugated species living under military occupation. Our xenosociology teams estimate that roughly 60% of beings in hegemony space are there against their will." The Admiral studied the data carefully. This was the challenge that made human warfare different from the rest of the galaxy. Other species fought clean, distant conflicts between military forces. Humans understood that war was messy, that victory required more than superior firepower. It required understanding the enemy's psychology, exploiting their weaknesses, and turning their strengths against them. Recommendations? Phase 1 should focus on precision strikes against military infrastructure while broadcasting humanitarian messages to occupied populations, Santos suggested. Our psychological warfare division believes we can turn the hegemony's own oppression against them. Webb nodded. What's the timeline for full deployment? 18 hours until all fleets are in position. However, Admiral, I should mention that the Galactic Council is attempting to intervene. Ambassador Chen is fielding dozens of diplomatic protests per hour. The display shifted to show a transmission from Council Prime Thel Andra. Her alien features conveyed deep concern as she spoke directly to the camera. Earth Fleet Command, the Galactic Council formally requests that you stand down pending a full diplomatic review of the Kepler 442 incident. We cannot allow individual member species to conduct military operations without Council oversight. This sets a dangerous precedent for galactic stability. Webb gestured to cut the transmission. Put me through to Ambassador Chen. Sarah's face appeared on a secure channel from the Council chambers. Behind her, Webb could see various alien ambassadors gesturing frantically in heated discussion. Admiral, the Council is in complete panic. They're threatening to expel Earth from membership if we don't immediately recall our fleets. What's your assessment of the situation there? Sarah glanced around the chamber before responding. They genuinely don't understand what we're doing. The concept of rapid military response is so foreign to them that they think we've gone insane. Several ambassadors have suggested that humanity might be suffering from some form of collective psychosis. Webb almost laughed. What have you told them? The truth, that the hegemony committed an act of genocide against Terran citizens, and we're responding accordingly. They keep talking about proper procedures and diplomatic channels. I don't think they realize that from humanity's perspective, those procedures failed the moment the first child died on Kepler 442. The Admiral leaned back in his chair, considering the political implications. Earth was still new to galactic civilization, and their membership in the Council was valuable for trade, technology exchange, and peaceful exploration. But there were some lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Ambassador, how do you think the Council will react when they see what human military doctrine actually involves? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, I've spent 5 years studying these species. They've been at peace for so long that they've forgotten what their own ancestors were capable of. Most of them evolved from prey species. They think warfare is about avoiding damage, minimizing casualties, and finding face-saving compromises. And they don't understand predators. They're about to, Sarah replied grimly. The hegemony made the same mistake. They thought humanity would respond like a typical galactic species, with committees and negotiations and carefully worded protests. They have no idea what happens when you threaten human children. Webb closed the connection and turned back to his command staff. Colonel Santos, initiate Phase 1. Across 17 star systems, the opening moves of humanity's response began to unfold. But this wasn't the ponderous, predictable warfare that the galaxy was accustomed to. This was something that had been refined through thousands of years of human conflict, adapted to the realities of interstellar combat. The first target was the hegemony listening post at Kepler 438. A fortified station that monitored subspace communications across 3 sectors. The aliens manning the post detected the approaching human vessels 12 hours before they arrived, plenty of time to prepare defenses and call for reinforcements according to standard galactic warfare protocols. Instead, they watched in growing confusion as the human fleet seemed to ignore the station entirely, passing by at a distance that would make accurate weapons fire impossible. Human vessels, you have entered hegemony space without authorization, transmitted Station Commander Velthar. Withdraw immediately or face defensive action. The response came from Admiral Lisa Park, commanding the 3rd Fleet. Hegemony forces, this is Admiral Park of the Terran Defense Force. You have 30 seconds to evacuate all personnel from your facility. Velthar's mandibles clicked in amusement. The nearest human ship was over 50,000 kilometers away. Even with their primitive kinetic weapons, they couldn't possibly threaten a fully shielded military installation at that range. 29 seconds later, Velthar learned something about human warfare that no galactic military academy had ever taught. The human ships that had passed by the station weren't ships at all. They were camouflaged missile platforms, their signatures carefully crafted to mimic standard vessel emissions. The real attack came from stealth drones that had been deployed weeks earlier, hidden in the asteroid field that surrounded the station. The listening post simply ceased to exist. No dramatic explosions, no warning shots, no opportunity for surrender. One moment it was monitoring communications across 3 sectors, the next it was expanding plasma and debris. But that was only the beginning. Across hegemony space, similar scenarios played out at 17 military installations simultaneously. Supply depots, communication relays, fleet coordination centers, all carefully selected to cripple the hegemony's ability to coordinate a response without causing civilian casualties. General Krexthor watched the tactical displays in his flagship with growing disbelief. In less than 4 hours, the humans had eliminated the hegemony's entire early warning network, severed communication between fleet elements, and destroyed the supply infrastructure that kept their occupation forces operational. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "General, our intelligence was inadequate. The humans aren't fighting like other galactic species. Their tactics appear to be derived from some form of total warfare doctrine we've never encountered." Krexthor studied the display showing human fleet movements. Instead of the predictable formations used by civilized powers, the human ships moved in patterns that seemed almost random, until he realized they were systematically isolating each hegemony fleet element, cutting them off from mutual support. "They're not trying to capture territory," he realized with growing alarm. "They're trying to destroy our ability to wage war." His communication officer interrupted. "General, we're receiving a broadcast on all channels. It's from the humans." Admiral Webb's face appeared on the main display. "Broadcasting simultaneously to every hegemony facility, every occupied world, and every military unit in their space. Forces of the hegemony, this is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Force. 4 days ago, you murdered 4,000 innocent civilians, including children, to make a political statement. You broadcast their deaths across the galaxy as a demonstration of your power." Webb's expression was calm, professional, but his eyes held something that made Krexthor's blood run cold. "You have fundamentally misunderstood the situation. This is not a territorial dispute. This is not a political negotiation. This is justice, and justice, as humanity understands it, is not negotiable." The display shifted to show tactical readouts of the attacks that had already taken place. "In the past 4 hours, we have eliminated your command structure, your supply lines, and your early warning systems. Your fleets are isolated and cut off from support. Your occupation forces on 17 worlds are now trapped without reinforcement or resupply." Krexthor felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of military service: genuine fear. "But we are not like you," Webb continued. "We do not target civilians. We do not broadcast executions as entertainment. We are sending evacuation coordinates to every non-military facility in your territory. Civilian populations will be relocated to safe zones during the completion of our operations." The Admiral leaned forward slightly, and Krexthor realized he was looking directly into the camera, directly at him. "General Krexthor, you wanted to demonstrate the price of defying the hegemony. Instead, you have demonstrated the price of threatening human children. What happens next is not warfare as the galaxy understands it. This is something much older, much more fundamental." The transmission ended, but the implications echoed through every hegemony facility. For the first time in centuries, they faced an enemy that didn't want to negotiate, didn't want territory, didn't want anything except their complete military destruction. In his command center on Earth, Admiral Webb turned to Colonel Santos. "Phase 2 begins in 6 hours. Are the psychological warfare teams ready?" "Yes, Admiral. We've identified the subjugated populations on each hegemony world. Our Xenoanthropology Division has prepared specific liberation messages in 43 different languages." Webb nodded. The galaxy was about to learn that human warfare wasn't just about superior tactics or advanced weapons. It was about understanding that some conflicts couldn't be resolved through diplomacy or compromise. The hegemony had wanted to terrorize the galaxy into submission. Instead, they had awakened something that would teach them the true meaning of terror. The liberation of Hegemony Prime began at 0347 Standard Galactic Time, but it didn't start with human weapons. It started with a song. Dr. Elena Vasquez, head of Earth's Xenoanthropology Division, had spent months studying the cultural patterns of the Zephyrian people, who comprised 60% of Hegemony Prime's population. They were artistic beings, naturally musical, who had maintained their identity through centuries of occupation by preserving their traditional songs in secret. As human fleets moved into position around the hegemony's capital world, every communication channel across the planet suddenly filled with the sound of the ancient Zephyrian liberation anthem, sung in perfect harmony by human voices that had spent weeks learning the complex tonal patterns. Within minutes, Zephyrian neighborhoods across the planet erupted in response. Windows opened, and voices joined the song, growing stronger with each passing moment. For the first time in 2 centuries, the sound of Zephyrian music echoed openly through the streets of their own homeworld. General Krexthor watched this impossible development from his command bunker deep beneath the planet's surface. How are they doing this? His intelligence chief, Major Krixtall, was frantically checking communication intercepts. General, the humans have been in contact with resistance movements throughout our territory for weeks. They've been coordinating simultaneous uprisings on all 17 occupied worlds. Impossible. Our counterintelligence network would have detected such communications. Not if they were hidden in cultural transmissions, Krixtall replied, his voice tight with realization. The humans have been embedding tactical information in entertainment broadcasts, historical documentaries, even children's educational programs. They turned our own propaganda networks against us. Above ground, the uprising was accelerating beyond anything the hegemony had ever faced. This wasn't random violence or spontaneous rebellion. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign that demonstrated humanity's understanding of psychological warfare on a level that no galactic species had ever achieved. The humans hadn't just studied hegemony military capabilities. They had analyzed the cultural, psychological, and social structures of every subjugated population, identifying the specific symbols, stories, and songs that would inspire coordinated resistance. On the industrial world of Kepler 283, the enslaved Altarian miners emerged from their tunnels carrying traditional blue banners that hadn't been seen for 3 generations, banners that had been secretly manufactured and distributed by human operatives over the past month. On the agricultural planet of Ross 154, vegan farmers who had been forced to grow crops for the hegemony military suddenly began harvesting their fields in the spiral patterns sacred to their ancestors, visible from orbit as massive symbols of defiance. On 17 worlds simultaneously, millions of subjugated beings rose up with perfect coordination, their actions guided by human intelligence teams who had spent years studying the deepest cultural memories of each species. Admiral Webb watched the planetary displays from his flagship, the TDSF Retribution, as it entered the Hegemony Prime system. Status report on ground operations. Colonel Santos consulted her tactical displays. Liberation forces are securing all major population centers. Hegemony military units are surrendering en masse rather than fire on civilian populations. General Krexthor has withdrawn to his command bunker and activated the planetary defense grid. What about casualties? Minimal. The resistance movements have been remarkably disciplined. It appears the humans provided very specific instructions about avoiding civilian casualties, even among hegemony non-combatants. Webb nodded approvingly. This was the aspect of human warfare that the galaxy truly didn't understand. Humans could be utterly ruthless in pursuit of their objectives, but they maintained strict ethical boundaries that often confused their enemies. The hegemony had expected humans to respond like typical predator species, with indiscriminate violence and brutality. Instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous: predators with principles. "Admiral," his communication officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Chen says it's urgent." Sarah's face appeared on the main display, broadcasting from the council chambers. Behind her, Webb could see dozens of alien representatives in various states of agitation. "Admiral, the council is demanding immediate clarification. They're receiving reports of simultaneous uprisings across all hegemony territory. But our intelligence indicates human involvement goes back months. How long has Earth been planning this operation?" Webb glanced around his bridge crew before responding. "Ambassador, what did you tell them about human strategic thinking?" "That they've underestimated our capabilities. But Admiral, some of the council members are becoming genuinely frightened. They're starting to realize that if humanity could orchestrate something this complex against the hegemony, we could theoretically do the same to any galactic power." This was the moment Webb had been dreading. Earth's demonstration of military capability was necessary to ensure that no other power would consider targeting human civilians. But it also revealed humanity's true potential in a way that might fundamentally alter their relationship with galactic civilization. "Put me through to Council Prime Thelandra." The alien leader appeared on a secondary display, her crest fully extended in a gesture that Webb's xenobiological training recognized as extreme anxiety. "Admiral Webb, the Council requires immediate explanation of Earth's actions. The coordinated nature of these operations suggests planning that began before the Kepler 442 incident. This appears to be unprovoked aggression disguised as retaliation." Webb chose his words carefully. "Council Prime, Earth began contingency planning for the defense of human colonies the day we joined galactic civilization. The hegemony's attack on Kepler 442 simply triggered protocols that have been in development for decades. Protocols that involve the systematic infiltration of other species' territories. Protocols that involve understanding potential threats to human civilians," Webb corrected. "Every spacefaring species maintains intelligence networks, Council Prime. The difference is that humans also maintain liberation networks. The implications hung in the space between Earth's flagship and the Council chambers." For the first time, galactic civilization was confronting the reality that humanity had spent decades quietly preparing for scenarios that other species considered unthinkable. "Admiral," interrupted Major Chen Lu from his intelligence station, "we're detecting massive energy buildup from the planetary defense grid. It appears General Krexthor is preparing to fire on the civilian population centers." Webb's expression hardened. The hegemony commander was making the same mistake that tyrants throughout human history had made, assuming that threats against innocents would force their enemies to negotiate. "Broadcast this on all channels," he ordered. His image appeared simultaneously on every screen in the hegemony prime system, from the command bunker where Krexthor was desperately trying to maintain control, to the liberation celebrations in the streets above. "General Krexthor, this is Admiral Webb. We are aware that you are preparing to fire the planetary defense grid on civilian targets. You have 30 seconds to power down those weapons." In his bunker, Krexthor laughed bitterly. "Human Admiral, you are in no position to make demands. My defense grid can destroy any ship that approaches this planet. If you attempt to land forces, I will eliminate the rebel populations in the major cities." Webb's response was calm, almost conversational. "General, you still don't understand what you're facing. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't warfare as you've practiced it. This is an execution." The transmission ended, and Krexthor turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare to fire on grid section 7. Show them the price of defiance." But when the weapons officer pressed the firing stud, nothing happened. "Sir, the defense grid is not responding." Run diagnostics. Sir, there are no malfunctions. The grid is simply not there. Krexthor stared at the tactical display in growing horror. The massive defense installations that had protected Hegemony Prime for over a century had simply vanished. Not destroyed, vanished, as if they had never existed. Major Krixtal was frantically checking sensor readings. General, the installations are gone, but there's no debris, no energy discharge, no indication of weapons fire. It's as if they just stopped existing. Above the planet, Admiral Webb's flagship held position exactly where it had been throughout the entire exchange. No weapons had been fired. No attack craft had been launched. The ship's energy signature hadn't even changed. On the bridge of the Retribution, Colonel Santos reported to the Admiral. Nano disassembly complete. All defensive installations have been reduced to component atoms. The process was entirely undetectable until completion. Webb nodded. Time to deployment? The nanites were seeded into the planetary defense grid 6 weeks ago during routine maintenance performed by Altarian contractors working for the Resistance. They've been dormant this entire time, indistinguishable from normal atmospheric particles. This was the nightmare that the Hegemony and the galaxy had failed to anticipate. Human warfare wasn't just about superior tactics or overwhelming force. It was about patience, preparation, and the understanding that sometimes the most effective weapon was one that your enemy never knew existed until it was too late. In his bunker, General Krexthor finally understood what he was facing. They've been planning this for months. Years, sir, Krixtal corrected quietly. Our analysis indicates that human operatives have been present throughout Hegemony space since shortly after their first contact with galactic civilization. They weren't just preparing to defend their colonies, they were preparing to liberate ours. The full implications of humanity's capabilities were becoming clear. While other species focused on military strength and political maneuvering, humans had been quietly studying every aspect of galactic civilization. Its strengths, its weaknesses, its oppressed populations, and its hidden vulnerabilities. They hadn't joined galactic society to conquer it. They had joined to protect it from powers like the Hegemony. Admiral Webb's voice filled the bunker once more. General Krexthor, you have two choices. You can surrender unconditionally and stand trial for genocide, or you can be captured and stand trial for genocide. The outcome is the same, but the first option involves considerably less unpleasantness for everyone involved. Krexthor looked around his command center at officers whose courage had finally broken. They had been prepared to fight a conventional war against a conventional enemy. They had not been prepared to face an adversary that operated by rules they had never encountered. What guarantees do we have regarding our treatment? The same guarantees you offered the children of Kepler 442, Webb replied coldly. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Krexthor activated his communication system. All Hegemony forces, this is General Krexthor. Lay down your arms and surrender to Liberation forces immediately. This is a direct order. Across 17 star systems, the surrender of the Hegemony began within minutes. Not because their forces had been defeated in battle, but because they had finally understood that they were facing something unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity had weaponized hope itself. In the council chambers, Ambassador Sarah Chen faced a room full of beings who were struggling to comprehend what they had witnessed. Ambassador, said Council Prime Thelandra, we need to understand Earth's intentions. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that concern many council members. Sarah looked around the chamber at representatives of civilizations that had existed for millennia, now forced to confront the reality that the newest member of their organization might also be the most dangerous. Honored delegates, humanity's intentions are the same as they have always been. We want to live in peace, to explore the galaxy, to learn from other species, and to protect the innocent from those who would harm them. But our methods are effective, Sarah interrupted. The hegemony killed 4,000 children to make a political statement. In response, we liberated 47 million enslaved beings without losing a single civilian life. We removed a genocidal regime and restored freedom to 17 worlds. She stood, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's message to the galaxy. The hegemony wanted to teach the galaxy that the strong rule and the weak serve. We have taught a different lesson, that those who prey on the innocent will face consequences beyond their imagination. As Sarah walked from the chamber, she could hear the explosion of voices behind her, some fearful, some angry, but many expressing something that hadn't been heard in the galaxy for centuries: hope. The nightmare that humanity had become wasn't the dark, brutal terror that the hegemony had tried to spread. It was the nightmare of every tyrant, every oppressor, every genocidal regime throughout history. The sudden realization that somewhere in the darkness, predators were hunting them. And those predators had learned to dream of justice,